So today I'm going to walk you through how I made this very easy, super simple open top storage toolbox. Lots of different uses. I like this style for storing long handled tools that I'm going to be going through a bunch of different ones. Open top is great for storing chisels, punches, pliers, wrenches, any of that kind of stuff. I don't know about you, but one of my favorite things to do is to clean out the garage and see what kind of little treasures I can find. And just recently I found some old cutting boards. I can't remember where these came from, but they're just kind of leftover scraps, practice pieces. I think they're a little far gone for a cutting board, but I think they might work out really well for a toolbox, kind of a farrier style toolbox. I also found these slats, and I'm not exactly sure what they are. I don't know if they were used for underneath a box frame or something, but it's pretty wood. So we're gonna see what we can put together. So the first thing I did with that cutting board is just squared it up a little bit, and then I added on some pieces just to stack that out. Just make it just a little bit wider, a little bit longer, and then ran it through the planer. Again, this is going to be a toolbox, so I wasn't super worried about how clean that was. And you're running that wood through the planer on that going against the grain. Gives you some really cool shavings for the neighbor's chickens. I don't know that that's a super great thing for your blades or for the wood, but worked out pretty good there. So I went ahead and cut the sides as well, and I think I scored on whatever this wood is. I'm not exactly sure what species that is, but really dense, very pretty colors. Ran it through the planer a couple times just to kind of take off that rough edge, make the finishing sanding a little bit easier on that. But man, I thought that was so pretty. Turned out well. I'm just going to use solid sides on that. And these are, I thought, from the same species of wood, but it looks like a little bit lighter. We'll sand those up just a little bit more, but those will be the risers on the side of the box. And then I have a piece of dowel that I'm going to use. And I don't go too thick on the dowel because I like to wrap the handle for a little fancy flair on that. But that's where we're sitting now, so we're going to go ahead and put that together. I'm a big fan of very simple joinery, and one of the easiest things you can use is something like a Craig jig for doing pocket screws. I just bought a very simple set a long time ago. This bit, a little square drive, and I'll go ahead and pre-drill these just deep enough so that it'll get good purchase with the screw, and then I'll use a dowel pin when I'm putting those in. So this is kind of how I have this set up. And then there'll be a little bit of a gap. So this one will sit flush with the ground, and this one will be flush with the top there. So there'll be a little bit of a gap in between. Just has kind of a cool look. And then before I get too far into it, I also just drill out the holes on each side of this for my dowel to slide through there. And the secret to stay power, a good old tight bond. I put a pretty healthy slathering of this around all the edges. The screws basically act as clamps while that glue sets up. It's stinking way strong. If you've not used this, I think you'd love it. And with copious amounts of tight bond and a bunch of screws, this is where we're sitting right now. So went ahead and wrapped the edge in pocket screws, lots of glue, copious amounts of screws and glue, a plethora. This bottom one goes all the way through into the cutting board. Just gives it a little bit more depth, a little more strength. But really, I think it's going to be the glue that sets us up on that one. And then at the top, there's the dowel running through there. And you can see that I left that just a little long. That might seem a little bit crazy, but there's some method to the madness on that. So there we are. Now, we are going to make another tray, kind of a shelf or tray. So let's Let's go find some cool lumber for that. For that top tray, I went ahead and used some more of that leftover cutting board and just did a couple of sides. And I'm going to do just spaced out along the side like the bottom is. Just trying to keep that theme somewhat the same. And after that's put together, again, I used just pocket screws on that with a Craig jig and put some dowel pins in there. And once that dries up a little bit, I'll cut those off with a flush cut saw and then run it across the belt sander a little bit. And that is what it looks like after a little bit of rough sanding. Getting those dowel pins down flush. You can see on this one I had a blowout on the side, but no big deal. Just made a little homemade wood filler there. And then we'll come back in a little bit and smooth up some of these edges. And get it ready for a top coat. If you're ever cutting up your own dowel pins from just a long piece of dowel, what I do is I cut mine just a little bit long. So once I put them in and they're glued up and solid and I cut them off, I've got a whole bunch of extras for the next go around. This might go without saying, unless you're like me, you need to be warned about certain things. Before you put this dowel in here and secure it, make sure that you put your top shelf in. So right now there's a little bit of flex to those uprights. You can open them up and slide that down, and you can see there's a pretty decent amount of tension in there right now. It's a pretty stinking good fit. However, if I would have put that in first and maybe had done it too tight, I wouldn't have been able to get these guys in there without sanding it down. This might be kind of hard to see from this angle, but when I'm putting these uprights on this box, I try to make sure that I get it as square as possible. So when it's time to put on that top tray or that top shelf there, all I have to do is put a speed square, rest it on the top here, bring it up, clamp it, rest that box on top of the speed square. That way I know that it's perfectly square this way, and I'm going to be able to space it perfectly this way when I switch over to the other side. Now all I have to do is put a little dab of glue on there, some fasteners on this side, and because I don't have that dowel in the middle, I'm able to flex those just a little bit so I don't drag glue all up and down these uprights. Whenever I'm using a dowel for a handle, what I like to do once I have that through the upright, I give it just a little bit of a hang over there for look, and I'll clean that up a little bit. Drill the hole much like I do when I'm doing a dowel pin, put the screw in there so the handle no longer rotates, and then I'll just put some type of hardwood on there just for contrast, and I'll just glue that, clamp it, and then come back and sand around the edges just to match the profile of the upright. I don't know that you need to do that or not instead of using a dowel pin, but I just don't want to find out that I accidentally weakened this upright and it's going to end up getting a crack in the middle or something. So I just use that cap as kind of a decorative piece, and also maybe just to make it a little bit stronger there. So if I'm ever making anything that has a potential to sit on the ground, on the cement, pavement, anything like that, I like to put little feet in the corners just to keep it up off the ground in case it's wet or there's chemicals or anything like that. One of the things I like to use, it's really simple, are these little finish pins. They're pretty stout. They have a cool look to them. And I'll just take my drill and set the depth on that so it's not quite long enough to bury it. And I put those pins in. You can see that there's just a little bit sticking out there. Give that a couple taps with the hammer, pushes it in. You don't run quite the risk of splitting them out, and they stay plenty firm. On the other side, I finished that handle with some leather and some copper pins, pushed in there. There's adhesive underneath it as well, so it's never going to come undone. If I wasn't going to use adhesive, I'd probably soak that for a little while. Well, that's how that handle turned out, and I'll do another shot with it upright. And there it is in all its glory. Just did a quick coat of warm gloss polyurethane, and as usual it reveals all the glue that I didn't sand off, but that's okay. Turned out pretty good. Now, I talked earlier about leaving this overhang, and I know it seems crazy for this small of a toolbox, but it is stinking handy when you need it for hanging stuff or for grabbing it from an awkward angle, pulling that out. But generally speaking, I'll just have a hose on there or an extension cord or something like that. The first one of these I made was basically for long-handled tools, kind of like a farrier would have, so a hammer sticking out. Just like that. And just so you have a bit of size reference for how big that guy is. Here's my size 13 foot. Just an old school, old fashioned little toolbox. Super handy, easy to make. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry, last bit. Love those colors. Thanks for watching.